Okay.
Go with fruit.
Yeah. Yes, when it starts nagging you, that's when you get worried. So for those of you just tuning into our ongoing conversation, talking to the camera, because we've been talking about cameras spying on us. Now the little blue light's on, so I know this one's watching me. The idea of being constantly under surveillance is, as I said, something that Judaism has talked about for a few thousand years. We don't call it surveillance, we call it under the watchful care of God. But the watchful care of God doesn't always seem to care what it's watching. That is to say, one of the biggest problems, the biggest concerns, the biggest sources of confusion in life is if God is everywhere, and God is watching everything, and God is omnipotent, why does bad stuff happen? Right? Why does it happen? And we're going to be looking today at a section of the text that gives us an answer. I'm going like this because the answer may or may not be to your liking. The answer may or may not even be understandable. And that's kind of the point. But right now we are in Tisa. We are in Parashat Tisa, which is most famous for the story of the golden calf. But there is another section within Tisa for which it should be more famous, because in the long run, it is a much more meaningful and powerful experience that overshadows the whole golden calf stupidity. But it is built on the aftermath of the golden calf, of Moses trying to get God to be compassionate on the nation and not just wipe them out. So we're in chapter 33 of Exodus. That's page 536. Page 536. Chapter 33, it's right at the middle of the page. You know it by the Hebrew letters over on the right, Lag, as in Lag BaOmer, the 33 of the Omer. So page 536.
33 and
36 in Shemot, yeah.
but what sentence? What,
Echad. Right at the beginning.
Okay.
Right at the beginning. All right, so we're all set-ish. Yes. And welcome coming in out of the cold. And my apologies to everybody watching up north. But you're welcome down in Florida anytime. Middle of the page, 33, where the giant 33 is. All right, Harriet, you've only got a few more weeks with us.
A couple weeks, that's right. Then the Lord said to Moses, set out from here, you and the people that you have brought up from the land of Egypt, to the land of which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, to your offspring will I give it. I will send an angel before you, and I will drive out the Canaanites, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey. But I will not go in your midst, since you are a stiff-necked people, lest I destroy you on the way.
All right, so this is part of the aftermath of the golden calf. And God is basically saying, all right, I won't destroy you, but it's time to leave. Head out from Sinai, and you're going to get up to Canaan, and I'm not going to be with you in the way that I am with you here. Now, does that mean God is going to be absent, as though God could be missing from a particular place? No, but God dwelling in our midst, the way that God had talked about with the construction of the Mishkan and all of that, that seems to be drawn back. God's going to be more of a pen pal rather than a neighbor. And, well, you can see the reaction.
When the people heard this harsh word, they went into mourning, and none put on his finery.
Right? This is catastrophic. So the people, despite the whole golden calf, which I will remind you, the building of the golden calf was the attempt to create a physical representation of God, not of a different God. When they now hear that the immaterial presence of God will not be as powerfully present with them, they are grief-stricken. Struck? They are really sad. They are really upset. It is though a part of them has been killed. And that means we're going to have to keep working here.
The Lord said to Moses, say to the Israelite people, you are a stiff-necked people. If I were to go in your midst for one moment, I would destroy you. Now then, leave off your finery, and I will consider what to do to you. So the Israelites remained stripped of the finery from Mount Horeb on.
All right, so God is like, you don't understand. This isn't just punishment. This is protection, right? Were I to be as powerfully present in your midst as you seem to want and as I had originally seemed to indicate, mistake, that action as opposite of my present will be met immediately with the repercussions. Right? There will be no distance with which to soften your error from its rebounding upon you off of my essence. Right? So what God is basically talking about here is sort of a cause and effect relationship. Right? When God is right there present in the camp, the people's mistakes will ripple through the camp, and when they hit that presence of God, they will be they will be redirected back upon the people who committed them and gone. There will be no moment for tshuva, no moment for repentance, no moments for change, no moment for compassion to kick in. It'll be a one-to-one reaction. Do bad, get hurt. And God is saying, you can't live like that because you people make mistakes all the time. And so let's just, it's not you, it's me, says God. It's not you, it's me. If we're together, it's just not going to be good for you. So we need a little distance.
But is it distance, or is God removing himself temporally? Because God's everywhere, it doesn't matter.
And that's what's so confusing is how does this work, right? What were we going to have? What are we now being threatened as not having? And we're going to have to go a little bit further to get some more grip on the situation here. But the fact is that this should be the focus, not the whole golden calf fiasco, but that God is saying, what God is saying in this chapter is incredibly important, and understanding God and understanding our world, and going back to our big question of, with what we think we know about God, why does bad stuff still seem so common? All right, so onward.
Now, Moses would take the tent and pitch it outside the camp at some distance from the camp. It was called the tent of meeting, and whoever sought the Lord would go out to the tent of meeting that was outside the camp. Whenever Moses went out to the tent, all the people would rise and stand, each at the entrance of his tent, and gaze after Moses until he had entered the tent. And when Moses entered the tent, a pillar of cloud would descend and stand at the entrance of the tent while he spoke with Moses. When all the people saw the pillar of cloud poised at the entrance of the tent, all the people would rise and bow low, each at the entrance of his tent. The Lord would speak to Moses face to face as one man speaks to another, and he would then return to the camp, but his attendant, Joshua, son of Nun, a youth, would not stir out of the tent.
Okay.
Wow.
What's happening?
Wow.
So first what we can read this as is being a question of, maybe that pen is dying. We were just talking about how long these pens lasted. Maybe the blue is wearing out. All right, so this is, for the moment, the tent. Where is God meeting Moses in relationship to the rest of the camp?
Outside the camp.
That's what this seems to describe, but where is the Mishkan pitched when we hear about how the camp is arranged?
In the middle.
In the middle of the camp. What's going on here, right? Is the tent of meeting and the Mishkan the same thing? Are they two separate items? Right, this has been a little bit of a debate throughout the commentators, because what this, in this context, seems to be implying is that there's the camp, which we know the Mishkan is in the middle of, and then there is a tent of meeting outside the camp. And this seems to be a response to that previous section of chapter 33, which is God saying, I can't be here, because if I'm here, bam, bad stuff's going to happen to you, because you'll be doing bad stuff. But out here, I can come and visit with Moses, and then Moses will come back, and the whole camp will be still and silent. By the way, partly the reason why we are told when we read the Torah in the sanctuary, you should also shut up. because God is speaking when we read the Torah. But so God would be speaking to Moses here, and then Moses would come back and relay the information. That's one model for understanding that. But however you understand, whether it was a separate tent or whether it was the Mishkan itself, it seems to be indicating that there were times when God would come more forcefully into the zone, only with Moses, and then withdraw, and the entire nation would be at awe during those moments.
So maybe they moved the location of the Mishkan after the golden calf.
Except we hear time and time again throughout Bamidbar that the Mishkan was in the middle of the camp. When we get the whole arrangement of the tribes in their special marching order and the camping order, it's definite that all the tribes are around the Mishkan. So either we had a separate tent, or they pitched it differently sometimes, or something's going on. But there definitely seems to be a bit of remoteness for the rest of the camp, but no remoteness to Moses. Right? We get the famous line here that Moses saw God face to face, just as you would speak with another person, as a person would talk to one another, which should also create certain questions in your head, right?
But Moses didn't see him, just heard him.
Well,
right?
but it says panim el panim, to face. Is that literal? Is that a metaphor? What are we saying when we say that we see, panim el panim?
We say God has no physical features.
And that's the big problem, right? Okay, fine. Moses has a face, but what's his face against, right? What is he facing? Because God doesn't have a face, right? God doesn't have a body. So what is, if we're reading this metaphorically, because clearly God doesn't have a body, what does face mean when it comes to God? What's that?
Something inside.
Well, God doesn't have an outside or an inside.
Right.
So what is face? And what does face mean then metaphorically for a person? We're going to come back to that, okay?
Maybe
Because
we understand better if we said that, because we have limits. He has-
we have limits and God doesn't. Very true, which in the next section, we're now on verse 12, is going to become very important.
Moses said to the Lord, "See, you say to me, lead this people forward, but you have not made known to me whom you will send with me. Further, you have said, I have singled you out by name, and you have indeed gained my favor. Now, if I have truly gained your favor, pray let me know your ways, that I may know you and continue in your favor."
All right, pause there. Moses is asking for something here. What's he asking for?
Someone to be by his side,
So,
another person.
right, so first the unit says, go, but who's going with me? And that was partly answering this, I'll send an angel with you and all of that, what we said earlier in 33. But then he goes into much greater detail about something. You've singled me out by name. If I've really gained your favor, then I want, all right, what's Moses's wish list? Does he want a new car?
So I know what you want.
I want to know you better. But didn't we just say Moses saw God face to face? That's like, how much better does he want? What is he looking for to understand?
Face to faces as one man speaks to another. When two men speak, they don't necessarily know each other.
It may not be as fully as we would like. So maybe Moses is seeing God, understanding God, in a way that is as easy for him as one human is to understand another human. But that still is limited, right? No matter how well I know another person, I still don't know their true soul, because I'm limited by the face. What Moses seems to be asking for is to know God's ways completely, absolutely, more than what you would expect a human to be able to understand, because, as you pointed out, God is everything, is infinite, and we are not. Even Moses was not. So, but Moses is asking for that anyway. So now you should be really, really interested in what God's answer is. Because now that we see what Moses is asking for, it's very audacious. What's God going to say?
And God said, "I will go in the lead and will lighten your burden."
All right, that answers my first question of who's going with me. God is basically saying, you know what? Okay, fine. I will go with you, and I will help you, Moses, to carry the burden of these people. Okay, but that wasn't the main question.
And Moses said to God, unless you go in the lead, do not make us leave this place. For how shall it be known that your people have gained your favor unless you go with us, so that we may be distinguished, your people and I, from every people on the face of the earth?
Right, so Moses is agreeing. You're right. You got to go with us, because if you don't, then the whole mission that you had for taking us out of Egypt, that you would be our God and we would be your people, it's kaput. Because how is the rest of the world going to know that what happens with us and what we do is because of you? And if they don't know that what happens with us and because of us is from you, then how will our existence help draw the world towards you? And recognize what Moses is saying here is that one of the main reasons for us, for Jewish people, is to help the rest of the world realize that God is God and that God is there for the whole world. And Moses is saying that has to be obvious, because if you don't make it obvious, the rest of the world is going to miss it. I mean, let's face it, the rest of the world before Israel was missing God all the time anyway. If the rest of the world doesn't have Israel as some sort of example of, look what being with God is like, they're going to keep missing it. And so that means God's presence among Israel has to be obvious. It has to be blatant, or else the mission is a bust. Make sense? Okay. But that means Moses is still pushing a little bit for what he wants from God. And God's going to answer.
God said to Moses, I will also do this thing that you have asked, for you have truly gained my favor, and I have singled you out by name.
All right, but remember, I've got your favor and you've singled me out by name. Moses had said that specifically back with the idea of let me know your ways in verse 13. So God is saying, okay, I'm going to fulfill your verse 13 request here. And Moses says, goody.
And Moses said, oh, let me behold your presence.
All right, great. I'm going to get your
Let me see you.
presence, right? Kivodecha, your glory. It's not the word that's usually presence, which is Shekhinah.
Right.
This is let me behold your glory. What in the world does that mean? What is Moses about to see that he hasn't already seen of God? And God's going to explain.
And God answered, I will make all my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim before you the name Lord, and the grace that I grant, and the compassion that I show. But, God said, you cannot see my face, for man may not see me and live. And the Lord said, see, there is a place near me. Station yourself on the rock, and as my presence passes by, I will put you in a cleft of the rock and shield you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will take away my hand, and you will see my back, but my face must not be seen.
Perfect. We understand everything now, right? Confused? What's happening? Right? So it sounds like if I'm going to, read this in some sort of literal way, that you've got the mountain, and there's a crack in the mountain, and Moses is going to be stuck in the crack, and God is going to go past, and there's going to be a hand, and you won't see my face, but you'll see the back, and this will let you know my goodness and my glory. Or maybe my goodness instead of my glory. Maybe you're only going to see part of me. How does this work?
Yeah, because before it says face to face, and now the back.
Right, exactly right. Exactly right. In 33, right at the very beginning, it said Moses saw God face to face. And now God is saying, you can't see my face.
Yeah, nobody can see my face and live.
But everybody said that Moses could see God's face. But now God's saying, you can't see my face.
Maybe the golden calf caused that even Moses lost credentials with Hashem.
But the idea that that Moses could see God face to face was stated in chapter 33 after the golden calf. So what is going on here? What is basically going on, according to our tradition, is that what Moses is asking to see is to be able to understand all of God, not just God as reflected in Torah, not just God as reflected in the law of this world, but he wants to understand every single piece of God. And part of what he wants to understand by that is that big question of, why does bad stuff still happen if God is God? And God is basically saying, on that question, you're only going to see the back. You're not going to see my face. On that question, you will not get the answer that will help you to truly understand me. And in fact, and we're going to jump ahead because I'm looking at the clock. If you look over on verse 5 of chapter 34,
Yeah.
right? So we're on page 541. It's verse 5 of chapter 34. So it's just the opposite page of where we finished last time. The Lord came down in a cloud. Yeah.
The Lord came down in a cloud. He stood with him there and proclaimed the name Lord. The Lord passed before him and proclaimed, the Lord, a God compassionate and gracious.
That sounds awfully
Yes.
familiar.
Anger, yeah.
Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum Vechanun. Right. That is why we sing this. Because when we remind ourselves of this phrase, we are reminding ourselves of Moses' experience in the cleft of the rock, catching the best understanding of God ever. And look at what is being emphasized here in this understanding of God. Compassionate and gracious. Keep going.
Slow to anger, abounding in kindness and faithfulness, extending kindness to the 1,000th generation, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin. Yet he does not remit all punishment, but visits the iniquity of parents upon children and children's children upon the 3rd and 4th generations.
All right. Perfectly clear. God is absolutely all forgiving, compassionate, slow to anger, and yet there are still repercussions. How does this square with what we have been trying to see? It doesn't, it's hard, right? Because God is clearly trying to share something about God's nature in this passage with Moses. And yet it's not exactly very clear. And I want you to go back to page 539. And on verse 19, we have to do a little bit of retcon. We have to do a little fixing. Well, because we read the sentence in English, and it's not exactly... So in English, it says, right, I will proclaim before you the name of the Lord. Okay, Adonai, Adonai. That was clear. And the grace that I grant and the compassion that I show. But in the Hebrew, it's a little bit more odd. So, excuse me as I lean in because my eyesight's getting what it's getting. If you pick up, it's in the second to last line of the Hebrew. V'chanoti et asher achon. And I will be gracious, right? That I will be gracious. V'rachamti et asher arachem. And I will be compassionate, that I will be compassionate. No, it doesn't really work in English because it's show compassion. It's awkward in English. God is saying, yes, I am gracious when I am gracious, and I am compassionate when I am compassionate.
Could it be read as to, I will be gracious up to a point? As gracious as I can be?
Or as gracious as you let me be because you may not behave well.
Or when I am gracious, I am gracious. And when I am compassionate, I am compassionate. But you can't understand why, right? Yes, I am gracious when I show graciousness. I am compassionate when I show compassionate. But when I am X, that is still going to be a mystery. You'll know that I am gracious. You'll know that I am compassionate. But when I am those things, when those things are experienced by you in this world, how or why, that you won't know. And that comes back to our text of not knowing. And remember, again, we're dealing with Moses here, who is supposed to be the guy that knows it better than all the rest of us. So if we're saying there's something that Moses doesn't know, that should be shaking us. All right, we're actually going to start with the second text. The first one's just a reminder of the whole face-to-face quote.
Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Yossi, there were three things that Moses sought from the Holy One, blessed be he, and he gave them to him.
Right, and these are taken from our parasha.
One, he asked that the presence of God should come to rest on Israel, and he gave him his request, because it said, is it not that you go with us?
Right, and so you go with us. I asked you to come with us. You are going with us. Moses got his answer, and it was an affirmative.
Number two, he asked that the presence of God not come to rest on idolaters, and he gave him his request, as it said, so we are distinguished, I and your people.
Right, because he was saying you got to make it rest on us so that there's an example. Right, so you can tell the difference between with God and not with God. And the people who aren't with God in the ancient world, the idolaters, who were very anti-real God, you know, they liked their other gods, but they were anti the real God. You had to make sure that you could tell the difference, because if you couldn't see the benefit of being with God compared to being with idols, then how would people ever know to come to God? And God seems to go along with that. But then the big one.
Point three, he asked that he teach him the ways of the Holy One, blessed be he, and he gave him his request, as it is said, show me now your ways.
Right. So according to Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yossi, Moses got the answer. Now, we just read that passage, and it was really confusing, and if that was the answer your teacher gave you for a question, you'd probably be very confused. But he's now going to try and explain, or the Gemara is going to try to explain what that answer looks like. You got to hold on. This is a process, so if you don't like the first explanation, good.
Oh, okay. He said before him, Lord of the world, on what account can there be a righteous man who has it good, a righteous man who has it bad, a wicked man who has it good, and a wicked man who has it bad?
Right, so we understand there are four problems, right? Or not four problems, but there are four possible states in the world, right? There are good people, and for some of them they have good, and for some of them they have bad, meaning their life is good or their life is rotten, right? One guy has a lovely house, he has a lovely family, he's healthy, he's, you know, happy in all ways, and the other guy, the exact opposite. But both of them are righteous. And notice that Moses is saying that happens, that there are righteous people who have it bad, and there are righteous people who have it good. And there are also bad people. And some of them have it good, and some of them have it bad. So that, according to the Gemara, was what Moses meant by show me your ways. And they're picking up on the fact that this idea of compassion and grace and of forgiving iniquity and all of that, that was part of God's answer. So they're figuring that must have been what Moses's actual question was about. It wasn't just, you know, how many angels can be on the head of a pin. This was what Moses was concerned with most, was the world seems unfair to me. And that doesn't fit what I know about you, God, right? When I look at you face to face, you seem fair and just and kind and compassionate. But when I look out at the world, some things don't look fair. Help me figure this out. And here's the first explanation, which you shouldn't get too attached to.
So the Lord said to Moses, Moses, in the case of a righteous man who has it good, it is a righteous man, son of a righteous man. A righteous man who has it bad is a righteous man, son of a wicked man. A wicked man who has it good is a wicked man, son of a righteous man. And a wicked man who has it bad is a wicked man, son of a wicked man.
All right, so the Gemara's first answer, which again, don't get too attached to, is no, it is all fair. It's perfectly fair, but it's inherited, right? So some people, they're a good person and their family has been good, so they inherit the good of their family and their own good. You put those two together and you got a good world. You got a good life. Some people are bad and their family was bad and they inherit the badness, and their badness plus the new badness of the person, put them together, boom, you've got a bad life. And some people, well, they were good, but their parents were bad. So you take the negative of the parent, you put it together with the positive of the kid, and you get a mix. And also you have some people that are good or bad, but their parents were good. You put the positive of the parents with the negative of the kid, and you get a mix. So it looks very easy, right? And no, that doesn't work.
But is this so?
No. You got to read that with outrage. But is that so? Right? Okay, because I want you to think real quick, right? Do what the Gemara did. You were just given a possible solution to why there are bad things in the world for good people and why there are good things in the world for bad people. So now you got to run through your mind. Do I know any good people that were born from good people whose life is terrible? Do I know any bad people who came from bad people and they still have a good life? This solution doesn't work. And the answer, by the way, is yes, that there are, unfortunately, good people who come from good families that still have horrible problems in life. And there are some rotten people who come from rotten people and they seem to have a good life. All right, so let's try and work on it.
Well, it's written, visiting the wickedness of the fathers upon the children.
Right, which we just mentioned, the whole, thing, but also it's written.
It's also written, neither shall the children be put to death for the fathers.
Okay, so wait a minute. How can you have this whole inherited guilt thing if in Deuteronomy it says children will not be put to death for the fathers, that you don't punish a kid just because the dad was rotten? Why should I end up having my life not so good just because, I have a parent that wasn't so good? And so then it tries to explain.
So these two verses were set into contrast with one another, and we learned it is not a contradiction. The one verse speaks of a case in which the sons take hold of the deeds of the fathers and do them, and the other speaks of a case in which the sons do not take hold of the deeds of the father and do them.
Right? So the answer that's given temporarily, again, don't get too attached to any of these, is, well, it's not exactly 100%. It has to be the kid does what the parents do, right? So if you have a rotten kid from rotten parents, well, he's rotten. He's doing what the parents are also doing. It's compounding the error. But if you have a rotten kid, the son of good parents, well, he's not doing the good of the parents. So that means he's on a different path. And also if you have a good kid, the son of rotten parents, he's not holding on to the badness of his parents, so he doesn't have to be punished for it. But we're still left with not being able to explain then, well, but I've seen good people who came from bad parents and the good person can still suffer. What's going on? All right, new option. We'll just wipe that off the board. New explanation.
All right, rather, this is what he said to him. A righteous man who has it good is a totally righteous man. A righteous man who has it bad is a righteous man who's not totally righteous. A wicked man who has it good is a wicked man who is not totally wicked. And a wicked man who has it bad is a totally wicked man.
All right. Another simple explanation. Right. It actually is very simplistic, right? If everything is always good, then the person must be always righteous, right? They are 100% Sadiq Gamor, they are a totally righteous person. And I don't mean that in the California surfer way. I mean they are 100% moral in everything they do. They follow God, Torah, all the way through. And that's why their life is perfect. Yeah, well, that's what he's saying. And if somebody is the Rasha of the extreme, he's the most wicked, evil person you've ever met, then you can be guaranteed that person's life will be horrible. But if you meet somebody who seems like a righteous person and life isn't so good, well, then they may be only 90% righteous.
Skeletons in the closet.
Skeletons in the closet. They maybe at home they kick puppies. I don't know. They got something that, because otherwise, how could anything bad happen to them? And for wicked people, well, he may seem like a totally horrible person, but maybe he's good to his mother. Right? Maybe he's a little good. And that's why some good stuff happens to him. Oh, yeah.
Prohibited it from reasoning that way?
Yeah, in Bava Metzia, we are actually told the argument of the friends of Job, right? Which is, oh, Job, I know bad stuff happened to you, but you must have deserved it, man. And we know, because book, that he didn't deserve it. that was the whole point of the book. And this is breaking that rule.
Yeah.
Now, the way to reconcile that is to say, you're not allowed to point to an individual and say, this is why it's happening to you. But if we're doing theology in the abstract, we can at least entertain the possibility, but you can immediately see that when you see somebody who you thought was righteous and they get into a car crash,
Right.
oh, Skeletons in the closet? And that's not what we're supposed to be thinking, right?
It's terrible.
Well, we think it's terrible. And the fact that you think it's terrible is because you have been educated by Judaism and the Talmud and the way we look at this for your lives. There are many faith communities around the world that think, no, that makes perfect sense. If you have something bad happen to you, you must be a bad person at least a little bit. Because otherwise God wouldn't have any reason to let that bad thing happen to you. And Judaism says no. Right? The book of Job is the biggest example of that. But this section from the Talmud, trying to read and understand this God's presence passing in front of Moses, the confusion of what's happening here, is being read as saying, trying to truly understand the good and the bad that happens in the world as being somehow a perfect reflection of God being there exactly in the measure as each individual has deserved, like some sort of computer running an algorithm for whether you get a new house or whether you lose your job. That's a broken way of understanding it. It is so broken, in fact, that even Moses didn't understand it. And this is where Rebbe Meir steps in.
Yeah, Rebbe Meir said 2 requests were granted to him and 1 was not.
Right. Remember, we started off with 3 requests, right? To come with us, to make us different, and to show me your ways. Well, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. He only got the first 2. He got make you different. He got come with us. He got make us different. But to know God's ways, well, what did God actually say?
For God said, for I shall be gracious to whom I shall be gracious, even though he may not be worthy of it. And I will show mercy on whom I will show mercy, even though he may not be worthy of it.
Right? It's going to happen sometimes that people will have good stuff happen and they didn't deserve it. And I can't explain more, says God, because you will not understand more. Frustrating, right? Because we want the world to be fair the way we think the world should be fair, right? Like a 4-year-old who wants exactly the same bedtime as their big brother, right? And it's not fair that he gets to stay up and I have to go to bed, even though he's 10 and I'm 4. As the parent, we know, no, it is fair, right? In fact, this is exactly the way it should be. And God is basically trying to say that for the whole world, yes, things happen and you will not understand them. And I'm not trying to say that it's fair on some cosmic level, but I am trying to say that it is part of the fact that the world works in ways beyond your understanding, that such things are at least potentially able to happen. Right? I'll give you, a little example. People get sick. It's something that we've all come to learn and understand that happens. Many people think that sickness is only caused by God, right? God causes people to get sick. What this is saying is, no, God doesn't cause people to be sick, but God did create us as human beings, as physical things made out of cells, and that means we break. That means we are vulnerable to things that can hit us, right? I can be stabbed, I can get sick. Viruses, can stab my cells and cause me to get sick. If God hadn't made us physical, though, what would we have been? We wouldn't have been human. Right? So, yes, the creation that God made created the potential for all sorts of problems, but it also created the potential for us to be human and to rise the way we are supposed to rise. And you can't have one without the other. But we can't see exactly why both those pieces go together. We can't see that face to face. At some point, we will understand it, however. And we're going to get there we're not going to get to that point, but we're going to get to the text explaining that in just a moment. So
God said, you cannot see my face. It was taught on Tanaite authority, Joshua ben Kocha. This is what the Holy One, blessed be he, said to Moses. When I wanted you to see my face, you did not want to. Now that you want to see my face, I do not want you to.
Right. Now, this isn't God just being tit for tat. This is trying to give us the relationship between us and God, which is when God came to Moses at the burning bush, what did Moses do? Right? He hid his face. And God is now saying, I want humanity to understand, and you were my best candidate. But let's be honest. Do you really want to understand everything? Do you really want to know how all the world works and is put together? Are you really willing to go there, to essentially give up your humanity in order to understand the mind of God from within this world? And the answer is no, we're not really capable or ready to do that from within this world. That we hide our face from God as much as God hides his face from us. And when God says, and that was kind of the right thing, you will never truly see me from the front. From behind, however, you will eventually see more. In retrospect, in hindsight, you will understand more. Right? You will, at some points in your life, you will have glimpses of understanding how tragedies that you thought were tragedies were not, and how blessings you thought were blessings were not. But you will only see that in hindsight. And you may not even see that at all within this life, because your ability and your willingness to truly see is limited. But there will come a time, which is why we come to Vayikra Rabbah.
In this world, the Shekhinah manifests itself only to chosen individuals.
Right, remember, the people of Israel told Moses, we can't do it. You go to Mount Sinai, you get the law. We'll sit down here in the tents and make a golden calf. And the Shekhinah just couldn't penetrate to all of them because they weren't willing to allow it to reach. But in the world to come,
In the time to come, however, the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all the flesh shall see it together, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken.
right? So from Isaiah, the idea being that at some point in the future, in Olam Haba, beyond this existence that we know in this way, we will understand. We will not just see God from behind, but we will understand all of the intricacies. In a sense, it'll be too late, and it won't help us today, it won't help us tomorrow and how we deal with what's going on in our life. But we will see how all of it works. The veil will be pulled back, if you will, and part of that will be our own choice. We will finally be ready in Olam Haba to understand the world and to understand God in reflection in a deeper way. But it's not easy, and it's not going to happen now. So for now, what we recognize is El Rachum V'Chanim. God is compassionate and just, and God is merciful. And we know that because were God not compassionate and just, not one of us could stand. Right? Who could stand before God and say, I am perfectly righteous, and therefore I have earned my continued blessings in my life, which, breathing, eating, being able to still sit and study Torah, we are all currently blessed more than we deserve because of God's mercy and compassion. But the full intricacies of who gets what and when, and what is a blessing and what is a curse, and what is nice and what is bad, that, if you think you can ever untangle that, you're incorrect. Not even Moses could fully understand how everything fits together. So instead, we focus on fixing what we can. We focus on making the world a reflection of God as we best understand God. So when we see someone in trouble, we don't, as Michael was reminding us, we don't say, you must have done something wrong. We instead say, how can I help? Right? And we see someone who's blessed, we don't go, oh, he must be a righteous person. Instead, we say, congratulations. And we make no judgment about whether he is righteous or whether he is wicked. And we make no statement about whether God is blessing you or God is cursing you. We hope God blesses you. We hope God keeps the curses from you, but we can't tell the difference sometimes. So instead, we do what we can, which is called Torah, because that God has given us clear vision to know what to do. And the rest we'll understand someday, but not today.
Right.
Okay? Okay.